that Lynn and I set out on a in the wake of the Vikings expedition cruise with Adventure Canada that was starting in Iceland and ending in Greenland. And we'll come to that more when we get to the end of it because we added on some days in Greenland. However, we flew directly from Vancouver to Reykjavik, and we had a little bit of time in hand because we didn't want to arrive in the morning and catch the boat in the afternoon. Air flights these days aren't reliable enough for that. So we arrived the morning of the day before, and in the afternoon took a walking tour of Reykjavik. And then the next slide. This is our tour leader taking us around Reykjavik. Next. This is a typical street in Reykjavik. If you haven't been to Iceland, anybody, it's a nice place to go to. Interesting. Next. And that is the Greenland flag to start us off on our trip to Greenland. We went down to the dock at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and boarded our ship, which took 172 passengers and is an ice reinforced ship for going into the Arctic area. Next. This is a map of the southern area of Greenland, and this is the part of Greenland that we covered. I don't know whether you're sitting on top of the map on everybody's screen, but you're sitting on top of part of the map where's on my screen. Anyway, looking at the map, we sailed to the southeast side where you can see south of that place called Tasiliak, there are a whole lot of fjords, and we went into 3 of those fjords. We had planned to go into 2 and then sail through the Prince Christian Sound, but the weather and timing for the Sound enabled us to go south of there into those fjords that you can see those jagged bits of coast. The Prince William Sound is right down at the very bottom of Greenland, and it's one of the fjords that you can't see it on a map of this scale, but it's what you might call a through fjord. You go in on the east side and it connects to a fjord on the west side. So you actually sail continuously through a fjord from the east to the west side. We then came up the west side and we had a landing at that place called Quakatok, which is about the second one up there. We then went up with some stops to Nuuk, which is the capital. And then after we went a bit further north to Kangerlussuaq with the cruise ship, and that's where we disembarked, and we did 4 nights and 3 days on land, with 1 night at Kangerlussuaq and the rest further north at Ilulissat, just near Disco Island further north. And that area is what's called Iceberg Capital up there. You're only seeing the southern, I would say, 2/3 of Greenland. Greenland is a country about 2,670 kilometers long by about 1,000 wide, about 3 times the size of Texas or Alaska. It's 80% covered by ice cap. Next slide. This is us now on board the ship, being greeted by our captain. It's a very international crew. He is South African, and every one of his officers was a different nationality. However, a lot of the catering and wait staff, you can see the chef there, were Filipino. Next. This is a little bit about the population. As you can see, it's just over 56,000 people, which is probably about half the size of Greater Kamloops. The population of the capital, Nuuk, is just over 20,000, about 1/3 of the population. And then the places diminish in size. Ilulissat we went to had 5,000. Quakatok, or whatever it is, around 3,000. And then they go less and less. Most of the population live on the west side. The southwest side is the greenest part of Greenland. As you can see, only 5% of the total live on the east side. Next. This is our John, who was our expedition leader from Adventure Canada. And it was his job to scout out landings, check they were safe with guards, organize excursions, make changes to the plan where they were necessary, and generally in charge overall of the Adventure Canada portion of it. Scenic representation of some of the glaciers we're going to see as we progress. Next. This next slide is showing our Innu Adventure Canada staff. As you can see, there were several of them, and they are gathered around what is called a kudlik. It's a traditional lamp made of some kind of soapstone with a little bit of whale oil or seal oil in it. And it basically was all they had for heat or light in the original days in their tents and stone shelters for winter, if they had them. Or their igloos, whatever shelter they had, that was it. And I might add, it was all they would ever have for any cooking either. So they predominantly ate most of their meat raw. Just to draw your attention to the lady on the right, her name is Erica, and she had a brief spell as the Prime Minister of Greenland, but due to some unfortunate conflicts of interest, didn't last terribly long in that role. Next to her is a teenage representative who was able to tell us about life for youth in the area. And the young man on the extreme left represented some young Greenland Innu, young explorers, they call them, that were on board as an experience for them. Next. Well, that was just me showing her traditional costume, but I won't talk about the costume here because I'm going to talk about it later on. Next. As soon as we arrived in the first fjord in East Greenland, the first thing they did was lower all the zodiacs. They have enough zodiacs to take all passengers out on excursions at one go. And here they are collecting prior to picking us up to take us cruising round the fjord. The first fjord was mostly notable for icebergs. Next. This is us. You can see me and Lynn here. It was taken by somebody else out in our Zodiac in this fjord. The blue jackets were Adventure Canada jackets that they provided for everybody on board and allowed us to keep. And most of us were wearing waterproof pants over some kind of thermal underwear underneath. Temperatures probably in the range of about 4 degrees. Next. Have we skipped one, Wes? I feel like I've skipped a couple. No?
I'm doing this off of your...
Yeah, if it's not skipped, that's
your
okay.
Google one.
In that case, my next one must come up after this. I thought there were 2 before the blue ice, but not to worry. We'll take the blue ice next if it comes next. The blue ice that you see is recently turned over bergs. The blue ice is normally on the bottom when you look at white icebergs, but if they turn over, the blue ice on the bottom is exposed. Next. Showing again icebergs in the fjord. Next. This is one of my favorites. It was a massive tower, as you can see. And if you look at it in proportion to the land behind it, it was massive. I felt it was a very elegant iceberg. Next. And some of them were chunky icebergs, and this one had a bit of an arch in it. It didn't go right through that arch. Sometimes you find icebergs where the arches will go right through them. Next. We are now into the next day and the next fjord. And in this fjord, we were going to look at icebergs coming down into the water, coming off the Greenland ice cap that is above up there. The Greenland ice cap is a very deep ice. It's on average 5,000 feet deep, up to 10,000 feet deep in some places, although there is concern, as we all know, with global warming, that it's starting to melt. Next. And this is starting to show icebergs tumbling off the ice cap down towards the fjord. Next. And here, this one comes right down into the water, and we're getting up close and personal in our zodiacs. For those of you who've been to Alaska and looked at them for a distance here, you're not quite in touching distance, but you're getting pretty close. I find these landscapes extraordinarily beautiful. Next. This is just showing some of the scenery and the peaks that were in the area. Next. This is our ship. As you can see, there's a lot of blue ice in front of it. The Zodiacs had to weave their way in and out of these chunks of ice to get to and from the ship. Next. This is us going ashore for a shore landing. On the second and third days, we did have shore landings. They always put a guard ahead first, although the polar bear risk in Greenland, southern Greenland, is extremely low. It was much, much higher when Lynn and I went up the east coast of Baffin Island. Polar bears were much more obvious. We never saw a polar bear at all on this trip. Okay, next. This is a fox trap. They used to make traps for foxes. It was like a chamber built of stone. They'd bait it, and then at the entrance they'd have a slightly tippy stone that would drop down and trap the fox one way inside it. There wasn't room for the fox to turn round. Foxes mostly were not being hunted for food. They were being hunted because they were a nuisance to the Greenland people, any area that they might want to camp, because the foxes would come and scavenge around the camp. Next. That's just showing the direct entrance into the fox trap. Next. Vegetation was visible. We had some shrubs and flowers of an Arctic tundra type out pretty well every time we went ashore. We had a botanist in the among the Adventure Canada staff, as well as experts on history, archaeology, as I say, Innu culture, you name it. We had experts giving us different talks about different aspects of life and Greenland itself. Next. This is just showing some of the area that is green, but this is on the east side, and the amount of green was never considered usable by the Vikings when they came to Greenland. They all settled on the west side. There were just little patches of green here. Next. And that's just us walking back towards the Zodiacs from that green patch to catch the boats. Next. And this is just showing some of the different flowers that we saw on the way. I think I've got about 3 slides here, Wes, that you can just show us them and move on. I don't know all the names of them, I'm afraid. If there's anybody that does, Lynn, do you know the names?
No.
I don't know. I think I learned the names at the time, but I have to admit I've forgotten them.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
think this is what the reindeer eat,
Yes,
the white stuff. Yeah,
the lichen stuff. Yes,
I can. Yeah.
yeah. Next. Another of our shore landings in the second fjord, we were heading for a waterfall. Those flyers, I might add, were mostly taken walking across the tundra to get to the waterfall, which tumbled down into the fjord that we were in. And the next slide, I think, shows the actual waterfall. Next. And that is the actual waterfall. The weather wasn't ideal this day. It's a bit socked in, as you can see. Next. This is taken inside the dining room and showing you some of the magnificent scenery, glacial iceberg scenery outside our windows. The dining room was always open plan seating, with the exception of one dinner where we were all invited in turn to dine with wine with the staff, some staff from the Adventure Canada. Otherwise, you just sat down anywhere you might fancy. You tended generally, I think, Lynn, to sit mostly in the same sort of areas, so we met people several times, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. Breakfast were always buffet. They were huge spreads. You can't think almost of a breakfast food you didn't get, and complete with an egg station to have your omelettes personally made. Not negating there were boiled eggs and scrambled eggs and other kinds of eggs available on the buffet. Lunch was nearly always a buffet as well. Dinner mostly was menu. We only had a buffet when there was some reason why they wanted to get through fairly quickly and get us out there because there was some program or something going on that they wanted dinner through a little bit quicker. Otherwise, it was a menu service, and the food was outstanding. I don't know about you, Lynn, but I thought it was all excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, the next. This was the sitting area when we weren't in formal session, when we weren't having a program or a presentation, which I might add, almost every time that we weren't going out in the zodiacs, there was some presentation or program being presented to us. As you see, it had nice views out. They had a sort of miniature library there. Up the far end, tea and coffee were always available. And around 4 o'clock, they would serve tea here. In other words, they put out some goodies as well as the tea and coffee that were there. Next.
Excellent library there, too.
Yes. Yes, they had a wonderful selection of books about the Arctic and the Antarctic. I enjoyed myself reading about some of the earlier days of Roald Amundsen, one of the first people to go, the first person to get through the Northwest Passage. Next, apart from the first person to the South Pole, this is just showing the zodiacs were up on the top of the deck, and they used a crane to lower them into the water. This is our third fjord, the one I mentioned that was added as an extra because they didn't want to go through Kristiansund this particular afternoon due to weather and timing. So they basically went into a fjord they've never been into before. But as John, our expedition leader, said, this is expedition cruising. If it's not right to go to A, we'll go to B. Next. And this particular fjord had more loose pack ice in it than some of the others. And it had, as I say, fjords again, glaciers again, coming right down into the fjord. Next. Again, this is just showing some of the pack ice that we were in and why you're happy to be in an ice reinforced boat, given that remembering these icebergs, there's more under the water than on top of it. So you're glad to have a boat that if it bumps into it, it isn't going to be a problem. Next. Now, this is the Prince Kristiansund which is at the very south tip, as I mentioned, and where an east fjord and a west fjord meet to form this sound, as they call it, or sund. It was something that we could have got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to view the entrance. I have to admit, I don't think either of us were that enthusiastic. I did get up, however, at 6 o'clock, and this is the view that was greeting me as we were looking at the Sund at 6 a.m. Next.
Oh, yeah, there's a village down there.
Yes, at the very bottom, I've got it underneath this village. This meeting is being recorded. You can just about see some houses. There's a little village here. It's about halfway through the Sund. Next. This is a clearer view of the village.
Doesn't even look like it's got a dock, does it?
The dock was right behind a bit of an island thing, I think
Maybe,
they pointed
yeah.
out. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. We know they had a dock because boats are the main form of transportation in Greenland. Right. Next. This is, again, further through the sound now. The next 2 or 3 pictures are just showing views as we went through the sound. Next. Yes, we're back now to the going through the sound, and we're still cruising. And I was just about commenting how narrow it gets in places, and you can see as we came through this area, it was quite narrow. You can understand why, if the weather was socked in and windy, why our captain didn't want to cruise it the day before. Apart from which we wouldn't have seen anything. Next.
Oops. Is that Nick? Oh no, that's wrong way.
Going the wrong way. That's it. Next. That's it.
Perfect. Lovely
yes.
pictures.
Yes. Next.
Lovely, Helen.
Yeah. Oh, this is me and John up on the deck, just enjoying the scenery. Oh, by the way, looking on the bottom corner there, you'll see my very handy stick with a seat on it. If I had anywhere like here, I wanted to be on deck for several hours. There weren't any other seats, so I was happy to sit myself down on my seat that's attached to my stick. Next. Again, this is the ship just cruising along. Next. In places, the sides were quite close and waterfalls were tumbling down into the fjord or sound. Next. And just getting some rather nice reflections because it was so calm.
Beautiful.
Next. Enjoying the scenery on deck. At some point, Lynn joined me something a little after 6 o'clock, but got up in good time to see quite a bit of the sound. Next.
It looks like it not dressed very warm.
No, you don't look like you're dressed very warm. You weren't planning to spend 3 hours with me out there.
No, I don't think so.
No. Next. We're going ashore again now, and I think our next stop was on the west side now, and we were going to a hot springs. Next. And this is a green orchid that was on my way to the hot springs. Mm-hmm. And here are the hot springs. Au naturel. These apparently have been known for a long time. There's a very primitive changing area. However, neither Lynn or I were particularly tempted to jump in. Going to be a little chilly when you got out. Next. Just another view of the hot springs and how close it is to our boat. Again, these are shore landings by Zodiac. Next. Our next stop was a very old church. This is an old Catholic church that now dates back to the time of the Vikings. The first Viking, Eric the Red, who came here and will be going to his settlement after this, was actually an escaping murderer from Iceland. And he called it Greenland, A, because it actually was green, and B, he was hoping to attract other settlers to the area. He was never a Christian, but funnily enough, his wife was. His son, Leif Erikson, who we all know, of Newfoundland fame, went back to Norway to talk about trade, and the King of Norway would only agree to trade if they became Christian. And Leif agreed, got lost on his way back to Greenland and ended up in Newfoundland, but then found his way back to Greenland, whereupon his mother did convert to Christianity, but Red never did. And they built some churches in various places where there were Viking settlements. This was not where Eric the Red settlement was. It was a bit further up the coast. But it was one of the...
This was a relative of Eric the Red that actually had a wedding there in 1408. So that was the last thing that was recorded that happened at this Helvesy church. Yeah.
Yeah. Next. The area had a lot of these beautiful harebells around it. Next. This is one of our Adventure Canada interpreters giving us the history of the church. Next. This is just showing a bit more of the church. I might add, afterwards, we did walk over the top of that ridge, just as sort of as a leg stretcher back before we went back to the boat. Next. Oh, these are just showing more of the harebells. There were lots of them. Next. And as I say, variations on heather growing amongst the lichens. Next. Our next stop was the village of Quartertock or something like that. You'll see it written down in a minute. I've deliberately put a picture with the name in it, so it saves me struggling with the pronunciation.
Okay.
As we came into shore, they have a little bit of an iceberg parked off the deck. You notice the multicolored housing. This is very typical of Greenland housing. Next. And this is showing the fish processing area and one of their more commercial fishing boats that they had here. Next. Here we are. Welcome to Quartertock or something.
One took.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
We'll go with that. We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. Anyway, we were being led here on guided walks around the village by locals. My guide was a high school student who was taking us round. They took us in groups of, 15 or so, in different, so that we didn't all end up at the same place. And I can tell you that this one is a government building, because there are 3 shades of building that you can identify as to what the building is. The black is police. I seem to remember the hospital was yellow, and other public buildings were red. Next. This was an art walk that we went along, which was actually developed, I think, in 1993. So it's relatively recent, where they invited artists to carve into the stone faces along this walk. I've got a couple of samples here, one of which is obviously showing fish and possibly a whale down at the bottom. And the next one, next word. And this one is showing faces. I never did get the symbolism of these faces. Did you, Lynn?
That's not the problem.
No,
not the
exactly.
issue. Yeah.
Anyway, it was an art walk
Right.
past these various sculptures that they had carved into the rocks. But as I mentioned, these are relatively recent. They're not historic. Next. That is the church, a public building. And most of the buildings inside here are red, so they're probably public buildings. I suspect that might be the school up and behind. This village has 3,000 people, and it has one of the 3 high schools in the whole of Greenland. There's one here, there's one in Nuuk, and there's one in a small town of about 5,000 people a bit further north. When you talk about Greenlanders at times wanting to be totally independent, in 1979, they got limited self-rule from Denmark. They had been a Danish colony for a couple of 100 years, and then they got limited self-rule. You do hear of them. We did hear a wish, particularly from Erica, the politician, that before she dies, they might get to true independence, but they are a long way off still, firstly, economically, and secondly, there's a whole lot of things that Danish is interwoven with them. They all start learning, if they speak Inuit, their language at home, and I might add 80% of them, the people in Greenland are Inuit, and it's the language at home. In grade 3, they start Danish, because if they have to go on to high school, they have to do it in Danish. They don't have enough Inuit high school teachers, and they have no texts in Inuit. They have to use Danish. So the high schools, the elementary schools, they teach them in Inuit, and they learn Danish. In high school, they start learning some English too, but they have to run the high school in Danish. Quite a ways to go yet before they could hope to break away. And I suspect with the political climate from the border south of us, they're not in any hurry to break away. The protection of Denmark is probably, an EU country, is probably quite helpful. Next. This is the old hospital. If we didn't know otherwise, it's because it's yellow. Next. Colourful houses that you passed as you were walking around. This is something you saw in all the villages and towns that we visited. Next. This is looking down on the harbour. This is where all their vehicles are parked. There's not much point in having a car in most of these towns, although some people do, because the roads run about 2 or 3 kilometres in each direction. As soon as you're on the edge of town, that's it. The longest road in the entire of Greenland is 50 kilometres long, and that's the one that we will see later when we get to Kangerlussuaq, that leads up to the ice cap. And it doesn't lead to any villages, it just leads to an ice cap. In the villages, the roads run, as I say, maybe a kilometre or 2 in each direction. So cars do have their limited value, but most people here have a boat. Fishing is a major way of life. And it's also one of the major commercial enterprises as well. They did at one point have a problem with somewhat overfishing, but they now put quite strict quotas on fishing, seals, and whale hunting. They do allow all of those, but they are with some controls. Next. Oh, this is just showing some beautiful lupins in bloom. This is not a native plant of Greenland. It was imported from Europe, we suspect, for somebody's garden. But it seems to thrive here, just growing wild now. Next. This is just a couple of pictures I took inside the supermarket here. When we were in some of the places up the east coast of Baffin Island and up to Pond Inlet, we didn't see displays of fruit and vegetables like this. They get ships from Copenhagen in quite regularly, bringing in fresh supplies. Next. That's just showing the vegetable counter. This could be any supermarket anywhere, right?
But seems to me their weekly ship that brings in produce in this village, it stops in something like September and doesn't commence again till April. So they got to be pretty conservative.
Yeah. And you probably have to plan your supplies and how you're going to use them to get through the winters.
Helen, are those prices in euro?
Krona. When I
Krona.
come to the next supermarket, I'll give you a couple of examples of prices. I've done the conversion on them. They're sold in krona. That's the Danish currency. Next. Oh, here we are. It's in this one that I've got the conversions.
Oh my God.
Yes. This is 69 krona, and it converts
Okay.
to $15. So your jar of Nescafe, which currently will cost you probably about $7 or $8 on our supermarket shelf, is costing you 15 here. Next. And I've got the cereal package next. And this is 45 krona, which is $10. So probably about double the price. But I might add, this is still quite a lot less than we saw in some of the places up the northern end of Baffin Island. Next. That evening, our Inuit folks, together with the mentioned the young explorers that we had on board, who were Inuit who had been invited to come on board this expedition cruise, and they were going to share some of their cultural activities with us. And this is one actually that is Canadian Arctic, not Greenland Arctic. It's what we did see up in Pond Inlet in the Arctic. And I gather it is from the Canadian Inuit that the throat singing comes into play. And
But
this is what they're doing.
it sounded better in
Yes.
Greenland than it did in Canadian Arctic. It sounded much better in Greenland. I don't know.
I think that was the quality of the singers, maybe, Lynn.
I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. The next, this young man that we saw earlier in front of the behind the Kudlik was playing the guitar and singing. I don't think he's going to be winning Voice of the Century anytime soon, but he was certainly enthusiastic. Next. This is one of the Arctic sports, which we also saw over in Pond Inlet. And the idea is to do a one-leg, one-armed kick of something high up. So you have somebody holding something high up, and it's his effort to leap up off one arm and kick his leg high enough up to kick whatever it is that's being held up. And of course, if it's a competitive event, it's the higher you get, the more likely you are to win. Next. This is the leg wrestling, and they invited some of the passengers to join in. People lie the opposite way and have their center leg up, and then they lock legs and try to wrestle the other person over. Next. That's being wrestled over. Next. And this is the muskox challenge. In other words, straight shoulder shove push, like two big muskox crashing together, and who can shove the hardest. Next. Now we're arriving at a place called Brattahlid, which is where Eric the Red settled. And this is one of the bigger Viking settlements here. And we are going ashore here, and we actually have a dry landing. I might add, every landing we've had to this point has been a wet landing. They provided us all with Wellington boots so that we could climb out of the Zodiacs into water. But on this one, we actually could land in our shoes. Next. That is us landing, a dry landing in our shoes. They could load from the boat 2 Zodiacs at a time, so they got through them fairly quickly. And this is us going ashore. Next. The first thing I did was to climb up behind the docking area where this statue of Leif Erikson is gazing out over the whole area. Next. And from there, you could look down on the settlement. And the settlement, both in Viking days and today, is sheep farming. They did, in fact, try cattle, pigs, horses, whatever. Everything managed to survive. Icelandic horses could survive here. So could some cattle. But sheep did the best on this kind of what I call almost tundra-like ground that is around small areas of cultivation. Pigs didn't thrive at all, apparently. They gave up on those in the early days of the Vikings. The early part of the settlement is mostly at the far end of this area, beyond that White House, which is a museum, and it's mostly in that area beyond it. We'll get to that in a minute. Next. Oh, just some vetch in the area. Vetch survives everywhere. Next. This is 2 churches in a sense. If you look at this grass area in the front of you, this is actually where the original church stood. And we're going to see a replica of it in a minute. The church behind is much, much later. It is not a Viking church. It's a Lutheran church that came in later, probably in the 20s. Next. And that is inside the Lutheran church. Next. This is a old house that would be built by Innu for the winter in the early days. They would not have this entrance that we see now because it let far too much cold in. As we get to the next slide, we'll see how they got in. Next. They came in through a slightly submerged entrance. It's a bit like if you've ever seen an igloo, you also enter an igloo slightly submerged from the main floor. It reduces the amount of heat you're going to lose. And this would be an Innu winter house or shelter because they would be out camping during the summer months, but retreating to something like this in the winter. And in this area, as they said, they had the advantage of all the stones collected by the Vikings to use to make a winter house. Next. This is the replica of one of the early Viking churches, which would have been framed with a sod church like this. And this would have been Catholic, as I mentioned. Leif Erikson brought Catholicism to Greenland after his visit with the King of Norway. So the churches during the Viking period, which was about 956 to the 1400s, was Catholic. The Vikings disappeared in the 1400s. They had a lot of theories as to why they disappeared, but there's nothing really conclusive. One thought was a mini ice age made them decide this wasn't a habitable area and they bolted back to Iceland. Another area is, for some reason or other, disease, famine, God knows what, decimated them. But the gist of it was, somewhere in the early 1400s, every Viking in Greenland disappeared. Next. This is just showing the primitive inside of the church. Next. This is, oh, so that's just another view of the church from the outside. They don't grow trees in this area. Anytime you saw wood, it would have been driftwood that they'd managed to collect one way or the other, or planks that the Vikings had brought with them. Next. This is one of the replicas of an old longhouse, and this was made of sod primarily. You can see the sod more clearly on the next slide around the entrance. Next, Wes. Yes, here you can see the sod on either side of the entrance. Inside, it's quite a substantial longhouse. Next. This is just showing the loom at the far end and cooking over a fire at this end. And then they draped Viking clothes on either side with skins as being what they would sit on. Leif Erikson's settlement was a center for Viking activity, trade. So even though other Vikings might be scattered out on sheep farms around the area, where they had a church, it tended to be the area that they came in to trade, obviously worship, and congregate. Next. That's just showing the loom and some skins and some utensils in front. Next. Sealskin clothing. For warmth, sealskin was used extensively for clothing. Next. And this was a secondary kind of fire in the area, which I guess was either used for heat or cooking or whatever. Next. This is just looking at the settlement another way. I might add, there are about 600 sheep apparently in this area. I saw precisely 3 of them, so the others must be scattered up the hills somewhere. Next. This is one of our cultural interpreters outside the museum. The museum house is actually the house of Otto Fredriksson, 1924. Now, I might add, Otto Fredriksson is an Inuit, but a lot of them adopted Danish names. And he was the first Inuit sheep farmer to resettle this area. As I say, the Vikings had departed way back when, but he started sheep farming here as Inuit sheep farming. Next. This is inside his house. Next. And would you believe the Inuit who were sheep farming did their herding on Icelandic ponies? Those are all Inuit sheep farmers on Icelandic ponies. That was not live, that was a picture of them in the museum, obviously from the period around 1924 onwards. Next.
So Helen, I'll just mention we got about 5 or 6 minutes and my session will end.
Okay, and we'll end, as I say, and pick up next Wednesday. Yeah. When we got back on ship, we now had another of our interpreters talking about the handicrafts of the Inuit people, showcasing some traditional bead making here. And I might add, they were being auctioned, these items, to support the young explorers. Next. And I mentioned the dress that we saw the Erica in earlier. They're different. They call those top ornamental garments palazzo or something or others, and they're very much in the Inuit heritage. They're handmade now and expensive, but they hope they pass them on down within the families of the female line. Next. And here are two people wearing full women's Inuit costume. They wear sealskin breeches, and then they have these sealskin boots that have been heavily ornamented on the top. And then some of them do the traditional beadwork that we saw in that earlier slide around their neck area, and some just make a sort of plainer one. But that is the traditional garb of Inuit women. The men's dress wasn't terribly exciting in comparison.
They only wear them for weddings and, baptisms, and, they don't walk the streets in these outfits.
No. Next. Oh, the Glacier Girl. Do you think we've got time to tell them the story of the Glacier Girl then, or do you think we're getting too close to time?
Ooh, I'd rather end off here.
I think
rather
we'll end
than
off
getting
here
cut off.
and tell you all about the Glacier Girl next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.